Hello, my name is Andrew Keane. Welcome to Keane on America, the daily show about everything that matters, with the world's leading commentators and thinkers. Hello, everybody. We're getting into 2026. And as we move on through the year, the Oscars are coming up. Hamnet is one of the fancied movies. Of course, it came out of the wonderful novel by Maggie O'Farrell. Maggie O'Farrell was actually on the show a couple of years ago talking about her 2023 novel, The Marriage Portrait, but O'Farrell has a new book out in 2026. It's called Land, and it's one of the books that America's best reader, our old friend Bethanne Patrick, suggests that she's excited about. Bethanne, it's almost as if 2025 didn't happen. I know it wasn't a great year for the book business, you were saying before we went live. Do you think that a book like O'Farrell's Land might make 2026 a better year for the book business?
I do think so, because O'Farrell's writing definitely attracts and appeals to avid readers and to, the women in the demo from, anywhere from 30 to 80 really at this point, who read novels avidly as well. O'Farrell has a real talent for inhabiting not just different voices, but different atmospheres, different time periods. Hamnet, of course, I have not seen the movie yet. I don't have to say no spoilers because, of course, I've read and reviewed the novel and I loved it. But I can, without giving you any spoilers about Land, say it's completely different. You're not in Shakespeare's time. You're in 19th century Ireland, and it's just after the Great Famine. And one of the main characters has been deeply affected by that, and has repressed a lot of memories about it. And it's about him and his family, and he and his son are surveying their region of Ireland for what they call the Redcoats, for the British. And it is a deeply intimate, from the ground up, and I mean that sincerely, look at what it means to take over another country. And gee, there are some echoes right now, some in the current events that might make this relevant. So it goes through stories of this entire family and what's happening to them. And Tomas and Liam, the father and son,
It's set in 1865 in
Yes,
Ireland.
yes, it's set in 1865, and it really delves deep into the titular concept of land. And not only are you looking at things in 1865 and a little bit later into the 19th century, but O'Farrell also goes back to some other time periods, imagines a Neolithic age young girl named Brith. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And there are these incredible Irish wolfhounds all through the novel that are a little bit magical, a little bit, they're real, they're wonderful. I don't know if you've ever met an Irish wolfhound. They're the most incredible dogs, Andrew.
I've seen them. I'm not sure if I actually formally met one, but
They are so gentle and they are so loyal.
They're enormous, aren't they?
They're enormous, and it's a very cool motif running through this. This book is beautiful. It
So
is.
you've obviously read it.
Yes.
When's it coming out?
It is coming out in May, and I highly recommend this one. I highly recommend it for other readers, for booksellers to hand sell, for everyone to take a look at, because I think, especially given Jessie Buckley's chance of an Oscar for Hamnet, that there's going to be another Maggie O'Farrell adaptation in the works.
Yeah, the marriage book. the reviews the overwritten. I'm guessing that you don't believe that that's at least the case with Land.
No, not at all. I don't think it's overwritten. It is tumultuous and there's a lot to take in, but it's not overwritten. It is something that keeps you moving. And some of the characters, again, without spoilers, move on to the new world. And it's very much, what was happening at that time. It's very real, very authentic. And it is Ireland for the Irish. The redcoats, the British people who show up are, I won't say that they're completely flat characters, but they don't really matter. What really matters is the land. What really matters, this is not a spoiler either, but there is a spring or a pool at the center of this little region that this family inhabits. And it does have some qualities that are slightly magical or mysterious, if you will. And that is very cool because it feels as if you're in an entirely different place with entirely different rules. And I've only been to Ireland once, but I went to both, well, not, I mean, I'm sure there's more than one. I went to two Neolithic sites while I was there, and they're really pretty it's pretty crazy to think about how long ago people were constructing these tombs and making these designs, and
Mm,
Ophora accesses that. She accesses the deep history of the what she calls the dog-shaped island.
I just finished Christopher Clark, very, very brilliant British historian. His penultimate, likewise, not current book, but last book was on 1848, and he really reiterates the brutality of not so much 1848 in Ireland, because of course there wasn't really a revolution, but certainly the potato
Right.
famine and the terrible loss of life. So is Land not about the famine? Is it kind of a post-famine novel?
It's kind of post-famine, but it's about post-famine trauma, post famine traumatic syndrome. That's what is going on for several of the characters, including Tomas and his wife, who both have managed to live through this, although they lost their families. So they wind up meeting in a children's, you might call it an orphanage. It's really a workhouse. So it's a book that doesn't rest on the famine. It doesn't, drag you through it, but you know that these people, these characters have lived through it, and you know that it has scarred them forever.
I assume, Bethanne, that given the resurgence of nationalism, especially right-wing nationalism in Europe, that O'Farrell touches on the attraction of Land in terms of identity, but perhaps also some warnings about that. And obviously, given Irish history, religious divisions as well.
Well, absolutely. There is quite a bit about religion, especially because one of the characters does decide to become a priest. And that's a fairly fascinating thread, not only about why he ultimately realizes he decided to do it, but also where he ends up and what he winds up doing. So the element of the church is in there, and there is a really viciously cruel Viscount and his family who have a huge manor house on the hill overlooking this area, which is never completely specified. And that's a fascinating choice on O'Farrell's part, Andrew, because she is getting so granular about how you map and how you survey land and how you mark it. And, Tomas, the father, is really angry because he can't put words and terms on the map in Gaelic. He has to use English, and that is against everything, he believes in. So she also brings in the idea of in imperialism and colonialism through language and culture. But as you were just saying, the idea of nationalism, it never really gels. And O'Farrell kind of opens you up to the idea that it really is the land, and just the land as it's proscribed, or as it's, geographically isolated. That's all that Irish people care about. That's very simplistic, right? And I'm not saying that that's what she meant to do, but it's for a purpose. It's to immerse you as the reader in the idea that there are places that become so important to us as humans, so important to our identity and to our meaning, and to our sense of self, that even when we travel an ocean and go somewhere new to a different country, that is still deeply within us. And someone said to me recently, gosh, I guess the Irish people had to have a diaspora, because how much soul can you have? How much emotion can you have in one country? And again, that's simplistic too, but I think it imbues land. And I think that's going to really appeal to readers. The idea that a nation isn't necessarily about its commerce and its productivity, that a nation is about places that feed and nourish people's souls.
From fiction to nonfiction, and from Ireland to Mississippi, one of your nonfiction picks is by Jesmyn Ward on witness and respect. Interesting
Yes,
title.
it
I
is.
know that she wrote something on witness and respect in Vanity Fair about her
Well, you
loss of
stole
her
my
husband. Is this
line. Respair, of course, is Jesmyn Ward's resurrection of a somewhat archaic word about the repair that comes after despair. So it is a real word. This is not a neologism. And that powerful, powerful Vanity Fair essay she wrote about her husband's very early death from COVID. He was just 33 years old. They had 3 children, and it was terrible. She says in the essay, he was gone within 15 hours of getting to the hospital where they went to try to get him, revived and resuscitated. So this is a collection of her nonfiction writings, and Ward is one of the few people to have won a National Book Award twice. Her writing is remarkable. It's crystalline, it's perfection. Her novels are models of what novels should be. They have meaning, they have style, they have substance, they have everything in them. Her imagination is incredibly rich, but also incredibly compassionate. And
Is it
so
rooted, coming back to the Mississippi angle here? I'm not suggesting that Mississippi and Ireland are the same places, but they have stuff in common.
yeah,
Is
they
there
sure do.
is this collection of essays rooted in place as much as O'Farrell's novel Land?
I would say, and it's not just Mississippi, because of course, for Ward, it has a great deal to do with New Orleans. Salvage the Bones, her absolutely stellar novel, which was the first novel of hers to win the National Book Award, is all about the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. So for her, although she's from Mississippi, I think it's really the American South, and the American South that is absolutely tormented by, embroiled in, and constantly fighting against the racism that is just built into the foundation of our country. And Ward, as a Black woman, there's no one who is let off the hook in her work. There are people who do terrible things for good reasons. There are people who do good things for terrible reasons, and the rest of the gamut. This book, with her shorter pieces, I think is really important right now, because it's important for us to remember and I have, 3 books of nonfiction and 3 books of fiction. I know we're going to talk about the others, but this is a collection where you can see the thought that goes behind truly great fiction.
Are
That
all the essays connected?
No, they're not. They're just all very different things that she's written. It's all sorts of different lengths and different topics. But it's all very important writing. And as I was saying, she many people think that novelists just sit down and it all sort of flows out like what storytellers, they just imagine this all and it comes out in an easy stream. And no, there's a great deal of thought. And the better a novel is, the more thought there is behind it. I'm not talking about outlining or storyboarding. I'm talking about the kind of deep inner work and thought about what you really care about, what you really want to say. And that is why I think this is a book for 2026 that will be really important. It touches on so much of what we have to grapple with today in the United States, but it is a creative grappling with it, as opposed to one of the other books that we'll get to.
Yeah, and of course, 2026 is the 250th anniversary of the Republic. And I have to admit, I was slightly surprised that you chose a book by a kind of mainstream heavyweight American
Yep.
historian, John Meacham, American Struggle. Was that your concession to the 250th year anniversary, Bethanne?
Oh, no, it's not a concession, and it's because, listen, Meacham, to me, he's an interesting guy. He is probably, much more personally and professionally conservative than I am, and this is not a concession. This is another collection, but it's not a collection by Meacham. It's a collection of other people's writings. It is speeches and letters and essays and testaments and documents to show that here we are. And Meacham is anti-Trump. Okay, Meacham is not a fan of the current administration, but he wanted to show that struggle isn't unknown to our nation, and it also isn't linear. You don't solve something and then it's solved forever. And for instance, he shows that there were people, in the 19th century speaking out against racism, speaking out for abolition. But then in the 20th century, we had to have civil rights activists speaking out against these things. And so, for instance, he's got testimony of Fannie Lou Hamer at the 1964 Democratic National Convention, because going back to Mississippi for a moment, Jesmond Ward's home, there was in 1964 terrible voter suppression and brutality against voters of color. And so there's everything in here from Abigail Adams's letter, the famous letter to John Adams, Remember the Ladies. So there's feminism, there is racism, there is argument about what the republic should be, there is wartime writing and what do we do, is dissent treasonous, that sort of thing. So no, it's not a concession. It is because these are primary source documents, Andrew, and I thought this is one that is worth, this is worth librarians and teachers and all sorts of people being able to say, let's pull this out and let's show people some of these documents that might, if not collected, not get in front of younger readers.
Yeah, we've all heard, of course, of John Meacham as one of the best-selling, best-known American historians.
Right.
Most of us have heard of Jesmond Ward, and of course, we've all heard of Maggie O'Farrell through Hamlet. But your second novel, I have to admit, I hadn't heard of David Bauerwald. This is
No.
his first novel. He's a songwriter, musician, performer, and composer. So tell me about Beowulf and why this is an interesting new novel.
So David Beowulf is not just any old musician. He actually had a song. I think it Come Away With Me from Moulin Rouge, from Baz Luhrmann's movie
Mm.
that won a Grammy. He was the person who started the Tuesday Night Music Club that Sheryl Crow named her first album after. He has worked with Joni Mitchell. He's worked with all these incredible A-list, double A-list
Sheryl
musicians.
Crow, Hans
Yes.
Zimmer,
Yes.
Baz Luhrmann, but that doesn't make him a good writer, right?
Here's the interesting thing. He is a songwriter. He's a musician, yeah,
Yeah.
but he's primarily a songwriter. That has made him a good writer, I'm telling you. And so here he is in his mid-60s with a debut novel that is absolutely, it's called The Fire Agent. It is fire. This is a 600 plus page book that is incredible. It's family history. His grandfather, Ernst Berwald, was a young German who was sent to an elite boys' school where the boys were trained under a Japanese sensei to be very disciplined. And he was sent to be the purported sales director of IG Farben in Tokyo.
Oh dear.
Okay. Oh dear is right. This is a novel that spans continents, decades, the breadth of human experience. There is a very sexy throuple going on, and we're talking in the 1920s. Okay, this is not, the thruples of the 21st century. There is so much going on in this book, and it's all based on fact. The novel has all kinds of photos in it that are from the Beowulf family archives, and it is fascinating. It's World War II, but it really goes all the way from the end, from the beginning to the end of the war, to the bombs dropped on Japan, and to the OSS turning into the CIA. So there are characters in here, everyone, there are Japanese nobles, there are politicians, there are Germans, there's Wild Bill Donovan of the OSS. It is, you won't know it's 600 pages.
And
This is,
the IG Farben angle, given their involvement with the camps, is that dealt with?
oh, it's very much part of this. And in fact, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that Ernst Berwald, who is, the protagonist for much of the book, has to decide, am I going to continue to work for this company, or am I going to betray my country? And it would be a spoiler to tell you what he chooses, but it is absolutely fascinating. This to me is a knockout for this year.
And it's good. It's a good story. I mean, given
It's a
given
very
the
good
misery
story.
generally in America these days, everyone complaining about everything and everyone. The fact that a guy in his mid-60s who's been a songwriter comes up with a
Yes,
major new novel is really encouraging, isn't it?
it is, and he's working on his second, and that will take up with the CIA, and it does involve his own father, and it is again based on family history, but he is working on it, and hopefully we'll see it. This one, I know, in the middle of it, he thought he had sold the manuscript, and then when he went to Spiegel and Grau, they realized with him that there was a 20-year period he hadn't covered that had to be covered in the book, and so he spent 2.5 years going back and writing that section.
Oh
He's
my God,
very
how long did the book take?
the book, I think the book took some time, but now that's what he's doing. He's writing, and I am so glad, because this is not a pot boiler, and nor is it, your sort of historical fiction that's all very nice and mannered. This is a wild ride, and it's scary, and it's more like a thriller than anything else, but it all, almost all of it happened.
Does it have, given that he's a songwriter, does it have a kind of musicality to it?
I think it does. That's one of the things that makes the 600 pages go by so quickly. It's remarkable, and as you were saying a little earlier, you're thinking, how could someone who's in the music business, turn to prose like this? It's incredible. He has so many different characters and voices, but everything feels very authentic. Nothing feels forced or as if he's, putting on, in text, as if he's putting on some kind of silly accent or anything like that. It's really well done.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll make a movie. I'm sure they've already sold the movie rights.
We'll
Your
see.
your final pick of nonfiction is by Kimberly Williams Crenshaw, Back Talker. It's described by the publisher Simon or she's described by the publisher Simon and Schuster as one of the most influential public intellectuals in the world and the architect of the two biggest ideas to reshape the American conversation. What are those two ideas, and why did you choose this book?
Well, first of all, Kimberly Crenshaw came up with two huge ideas that now we just toss around as terms, but she is the architect of so much behind them. One is intersectionality, and the other one is critical race theory. And of course, these are both under attack in the
What do
current
they mean?
environment.
I've never known what does intersectionality mean?
Intersectionality means, and I will speak about it specifically in terms of feminism, even though it has other, um, you know, angles to it as well. But for example, you cannot have a feminism that just talks about the experiences and writings and ideas of white women. There are things that are highly upsetting to a privileged white woman like me that a woman of color has a completely different experience of, because of upbringing, because of education, because of resources. And Crenshaw has really developed this into a field. It's taking social identities, and we all have so many, and saying, how are these identities related to the dominant power structures in our society? And I think that is something that took way too long to be discussed. And people tried, over the years to discuss it, but Crenshaw had the wherewithal to bring it to the forefront of academia. And then, of course, critical race theory is about how dominant power structures influence things as well. And so intersectionality says, if you are um, a woman and you're Black, and maybe you're also Latinx, and then maybe you're also a single parent, how do all of these things work together to shape your worldview and what you need? And critical race theory, talk about, I used the word simplistic earlier. Crenshaw is so much smarter than I am. She's incredible. But what I love about this book, and why I wanted to put this in here, Andrew, is it's a memoir from Crenshaw. She's written some incredible books, and they are accessible. She's a great writer. Her writing is not filled with academic gobbledygook or sententiousness. But here she has a book, a memoir in three parts: raising a backtalker, becoming a backtalker, and being a backtalker. And she starts out with a very early experience of, she had great parents. And part of their great parenting was they backed her up whenever something in her world seemed unjust, seemed unfair, and she was questioning it. They didn't say, don't question authority. They didn't say, are you sure you didn't get that wrong? They said, okay, our daughter says this didn't work. And so she gives the example of I believe it's a kindergarten teacher, it might be a first grade teacher, who lets one girl in the classroom every week act the part of Thorn Rose in a sort of fairy tale that the teachers made up. And little Crenshaw, wants to be Thorn Rose. And you see her agony and her sorrow as the school year goes on, and she never gets chosen. And she'll say, me, I want to be Thorn Rose. And so finally, the last week of school, the teacher picks her, the bell rings, and she can't be Thorn Rose. Mrs. Williams marched right back to school with little Kimberly Crenshaw and said to the teacher, guess what? The beginning of the next school year, my daughter's going to be Thorn Rose, and you're going to put on this entire little whatever fairy tale or play. And so she learned at her parents' knees the fact that you can speak truth to power and you can affect change. And it is a marvel of a memoir. It is so.
It sounds very much, and correct me if I'm wrong, very much of an American narrative here.
It is very much of an American narrative, and I think it's an American narrative that, needs to be paid attention to right now. It's just, again, this is one of those books I can imagine lots and lots of booksellers hand selling to readers. This is terrific.
And finally, another perhaps American book. This is your final fictional pick by
Yep.
Chang-Rae Lee, A Tender Age. Tell me about this book. Chang-Rae Lee was a Pulitzer Prize finalist, so
Yes.
better known than David By Award. Why did you pick this? You're very strong on fiction.
I am strong on fiction, and that's my great love. Chang-Rae Lee is one of our finest novelists, and I would put Chang-Rae Lee right up there with Jesmyn Ward, and I absolutely revere her writing. Chang-Rae Lee's last one I reviewed, and of course Andrew, the title of it is slipping for me right now, but I absolutely have loved all of his novels, and I know that this one is this one, I will confess, I haven't finished, okay? I hate to have to say that, but I'm going to be as
Well, the publisher claims it's a spellbinding exploration of American masculinity and
yes.
family dynamics. So another classic American kind of novel.
It is, and I am about halfway through, and this protagonist is unforgettable and absolutely it carries you right along because you're looking at, again, someone who understands the immigrant experience, someone who is living, the term Crenshaw and Ward would understand very well the term double consciousness for African Americans, and how you always have to be thinking of yourself on this level, but also remembering the level that the dominant class, the white upper class, is how they're looking at you. And I think Chang-Rae Lee and some of our other great contemporary Asian American novelists are able to show. I'm not trying to say that double consciousness goes for all different races and ethnicities, but I think Chang-Rae Lee in this book, as far as I've read, is showing what it's like to grow up as an Asian American boy, with that feeling of I am not allowed to be completely a whole person. I have to make sure that I'm always paying attention to what the dominant class thinks of me and thinks of my family and thinks of my chances. And so you cannot go wrong with Chang-Rae Lee. Let's put it
You
that way.
certainly can't if that's the kind of story you like. Let's end. I usually ask you which one you're most looking forward to. I think
Yeah.
that's a bit of a cheap below the belt question.
Well, I have another one to tell you about if you want to say what is my favorite so far.
Oh, well, you haven't given me. What's the third? This is the seventh?
Yeah, this is the seventh, but I'll just tell you, and I am.
You've added this.
I've added this.
Is
It's
this
not
part of the rules? Are you allowed to do this?
I know I'm breaking the rules because this is
you're doing a Chang you're doing a Chang Ray Lee on me.
I am, and so this is I'm biased because I had a blurb from the Washington Post on the front of this author's first novel, Shuggie Bain. Douglas Stewart.
Oh yeah, who Atlantic published the first one, right? It won the Booker Prize.
Yes, it did. And he wrote another one called Young Mungo but this year's is incredible. It's called John of John. And it's called John of John because it's set in on the island of Harris, where they make Harris tweed. So that's I believe
very much of a Scottish writer, of course.
Very much of a Scottish writer.
To be read, I guess, alongside O'Farrell.
It could be read, and I think that's maybe that was what made me put them together. But I will tell you, this is about a man named John McLeod, and he has I think it's called a shareholding, on the Isle of Harris. So he is a licensed weaver of Harris tweed, and he has this house, and his son, John Callum, who's known as Cal, comes back from art college in Glasgow, and he comes home, and he's sort of you think it's going to be a prodigal son returned, but there's a lot between these two. And what turns out happening is that Cal is very much, when he's in Glasgow, someone who identifies as queer, dresses very trendily, has long dyed hair, has a lot of, habits that are just very citified. And he goes back to this island, and his father is a fire and brimstone breathing elder of the small, Church of Scotland on the island, and is furious with his son's hair. He's furious with his son's friends, his son's ideas about his career. But what happens is we learn about the father, and the father and son have a lot more in common than you would believe they do. But
sounds like, in some ways, rather like A Tender Age.
Yeah, it is. But it is, of course, not just about the father and son. It's about the island and how it works together as a community, and what it's like to have a place that is so tied to sheep farming, but the wool on the sheep on the island can't be used for the tweed because it's too coarse and difficult to shear. So the sheep are really raised just so that lambs can be slaughtered for their meat and for use on the island, and for, to be exported as well. So it's a look at a very small corner of a contemporary country. So this is set in the 21st century, but you're looking at these people who are still living a life that, is 100, 200 years old, and based on all of these different agrarian and craft practices. And there's a lot of resentment, a lot of miscommunication, a lot of tenderness. It is beautiful. It's absolutely it's going to be one of my favorites of the year, I have a feeling.
Well, the question I was going to end on, Bethanne, is not so much which is the best, because the best is not a very useful word, but of all these books, and we can include the last one, the seventh one, which is the most surprising? What people want, books that perhaps surprise them, that shock them, that will be about stuff that they don't quite expect, or with attitudes and ideas that they don't quite expect. Which of these books do you think would be the most surprising or jarring, get people to really think for themselves?
That would be the Douglas Stewart. I think John of John is the most surprising, the most unusual, the one that has things happening that you would not predict. And I mean, I could go on about others, but I'm not going to do that to you. We're going to leave people with 7 books, and I'm going to say, John of John by Douglas Stewart is a truly surprising, truly rich, and worthwhile novel. That comes out in May as well. I believe it might be June. We can check that for our loyal listeners and viewers and readers, but it is something to look forward to.
Yeah, and the nice thing about John of John is that it's published by my old publisher, Grove Atlantic.
So,
Looks
yes,
like a great book. I'll have to get a copy myself through
you
the
will. I
PR
think you will
department.
love it.
Maybe we can get Douglas Stewart on the show. Well, Bethanne, as always, a real pleasure and honor. You bring so much wisdom and scope and passion to your reading. Thank you so much. And we will talk in the not too distant future, because there are many, many more books in 2026. There's
Yes.
the American anniversary, there's the World Cup, many other things happening this year, which will, I think, trigger all sorts of interesting books. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Andrew.